Hello, Fraser. Could you please give us a short introduction to who you are and where you come from?
Hi. I'm from Merimbula on the far south coast of New South Wales in the electorate of Eden Monaro. And I've grown up down there on the coast, been fortunate enough to grow up in that beautiful little hamlet down there. And very lucky me. That's how I see it.
And what's your background, Fraser? What were you? What is your work if you're still working?
Yeah, okay. Look, I'm just a high school certificate guy. I got an apprenticeship when I left school, panel beating and spray painting, and which I completed. Then I sort of jumped and went to did a bit of electronics work, and I did TV antenna work for 25 years and satellite TV installations, and then I moved across to bushfire sprinkler systems, and I've also done various other things in the meantime. But I have been on council. I was on council between 2004 and 2008 because I was very concerned about some environmental issues that were happening in Merimbula. As I'm a surfer, I was very concerned about the ocean outfall and just the pouring of effluent onto the beach was inappropriate, and I wanted to get that sorted. And I was quite disturbed about some development issues that were happening in the local area, which I thought were to the detriment of the town.
So, how did you actually get elected? I mean, what was the process for you to get elected to council?
I really think I probably got a bit of a platform. I was very well known around the area because I'd done a lot of work with the TV antenna work, and I had a good reputation of being a nice, fair guy and a decent, caring person. And when I stood up on the issues of the ocean outfall, I drew a fair bit of attention to myself and forced the council to sort of respond accordingly. And then I got elected on that platform. Really, yeah.
How did you find the media back then when you were way back before COVID? And being running for the council, were they receptive to you?
Absolutely, they were. They were really good, and even in the time I was on council, they were very receptive to me, and I had a great relationship with the media and communicated with them on a daily basis, and gave them lots of information and interviews and talked about things that we were involved with. But it was around about that time, 2007 or 2008, around that time that there seemed to be a shift in the media's ability to scrutinise and really dig into council's activities, and council started to uh, have a media release officer and started to put media releases out rather than be interviewed and just allow journalists to access information and so on. They had a media liaison officer who prepared pre-done statements on the issues of concern, and they started to control the narrative and started to discourage or disable the ability of the councillors to engage wholeheartedly with the media.
And how did you find working on council? I mean, were there Labor and Liberal and National Party people on the council, or was it just individuals from the area?
At the time, it was only individuals. There wasn't. There was a Greens councillor, and I sort of considered myself to be quite green because I cared about the environment and so on. So that's what I considered how I thought Greens were. Certainly, they had a strong narrative on the forest logging activities that were going on in the area. My concerns in that area were erosion and things like that, and loss of habitat for animals. But I've always claimed that if those issues could be dealt with, I did support the industry. It seems that the Greens have really been drawn into this climate change narrative of today, and that seems to be the only thing it's front centre and everything in their minds is this climate emergency that is being portrayed in our society.
So when did you spend more than one term or just one term?
No, just one term. I did think I was a shoe-in for a second term, and I missed out by 20 odd votes. There had been a smear campaign against me on the week of the election in the local media. They had turned on me, and there was a claim that I was being investigated by ICAC for corrupt dealings, of which I never even so much as received a phone call from ICAC about anything. And first I heard of it was when I saw it on the front page of the paper.
So who was behind the smear
There were
campaign?
some developers in town and business people in town who weren't enjoying the things that I was sort of pushing for. I was pushing to restrict the scale of development that could go into the town or into the particular heart of the town because of the constraints of the topography of the town, the lake. It lent itself to be al fresco and be a tourism precinct, but there was a push to bring large-scale malls and big retailers into the town, and I really thought that was going to destroy the amenity of the place, and as did a lot of the people. And we had lots and lots of people. It was a very democratic time because we had meetings, we had thousands of people sign petitions, and we had big public meetings with hundreds and hundreds of people, all the townsfolk turning up and so on. So it was a proper process, and it was really quite good. But at the end of the day, they drove me out of council because they thought I was a threat to their ambitions of making money, I think.
It's typical of you don't realise, you read about these things in the paper and you hear whispers about this, but it really honestly goes on. If you stand in the way of people who have money and power and you are a hindrance, they can actually, when they turn against you, they can make your life hell, and that's what seems to have happened to you.
It was a learning experience, but a great experience all the same. And I did really shift a few things and made things happen, and which was great. And even though they undid a lot of the stuff that I had managed to put in place, they did undo a lot of the stuff, regrettably. But yeah.
So with council, in federal parliament and state parliaments, they say that independents are a hindrance. It stops process, it stops innovation, it stops, policies that are going to help the public. But you were on a council mostly with independents. Were there coalitions formed within those independents? Were there voting blocks? Did people join together? How did it work?
Well, not really. Look, there was a bit of a push with the sort of Merimbula councillors or people from down our way relative to the Bega ones who were on the sort of inland side of things. And there was a bit of a conflict between whether Bega was to be designated as the regional centre of the Shire or Merimbula, because Merimbula had been a tourist hamlet for quite a while, but Bega had been the backbone of the rural area for well over 150 years. It had been the mainstay regional centre of the rural hub, and Merimbula was just a little fishing village that people went and spent their weekends at, and that was it. But there had been, because of the attraction of tourism and the beaches and the lure of retiring people coming to the area, lots of people came up from Melbourne and so on, and look, a lot of them live in Merimbula, and they or Tura, which was a hamlet suburb off Merimbula, and Pambula and so on. The whole little region was growing profusely because of people moving there, and they hardly even recognised that Bega existed. But I supported Bega to be the regional centre, which was against some of the desires of some of the Merimbula people who'd moved to Merimbula, particularly, not the long-termers who understood, but the ones who were more recent. They thought everything should be right at their doorstep. They'd come and say, "Don't you have a Bunnings? Don't you have a Macca's? Don't you have a this and don't you have a that? Why don't you have this?" And you think, well, you left all that to come here, and why didn't you did you want to bring it with you? Did you, or why didn't you just stay there and you'd have all those things? Really. So it was sort of they were bringing their mentality with them.
So what happened after council? What did your life look like after that?
Well, yeah. Actually, I got involved with a ratepayers association, and we established quite a very strong, robust ratepayers association that scrutinised the operations of council, and we had a very formidable little team that worked hard. We had one guy in particular, John Richardson, who was outstanding, and he was sharp as the sharpest knife in the drawer, and they had a lot of problems with trying to subdue John. He was scrutinising their finances like no one ever had before, and he found the big holes in their finances and exposed all sorts of inappropriate performance and so on. And called them out a lot, and they really did not know how to handle us. It was quite interesting. But unfortunately, John got ill, and he got cancer, and passed on. And the workload that he put into the Ratepayers Association was very hard for anyone to handle his capacity. So the Ratepayers Association sort of went into a bit of a dormant time, and then COVID came along, and bing bang bong, there we go.
So when COVID happened, were you concerned about what was happening, with the mandates, with the mask wearing, with closing the country down? Did those issues concern you?
Absolutely, they did. Look, when I first heard of this supposed contagious virus that could spread throughout the world, and it was likely, it could, if it came into our country, it would sweep through and wipe out populace and all this sort of stuff, and it was in China, and people were dying in China and all this sort of stuff. I thought, my gut feeling and my thoughts were that, oh, okay, it sounds like, and I saw a few people falling over in the streets in China. It looked like I just got this gut feeling it was like a preordained, staged scenario, an event that was being put on. And I thought, what's going on here? What are they up to? And I had a gut feeling. I thought to myself, I bet they're going to want to jab everyone. I bet they're going to want to stick needles in everyone. They're going to want to vaccinate everyone. I don't know really why I thought that, but I thought that wholeheartedly, and I was very skeptical about it. And I started to look into a bit of stuff, and I saw Dolores Cahill in particular in those early days with the World Freedom Alliance or whatever she was. But she was outstanding with the information that she was revealing about these mRNA vaccines and the harms that they caused, and that they had never been properly tested. And in the testing that they had done, they'd killed all the animals that they tried it on, all the rats, they'd all died. Everything had died that they pretty well tried it upon, and they were going to push it into people with inadequate testing. And she was very, very concerned about it. And then a lot of other doctors were getting on board and coming to the fore, Mike Yeadon and so on and so forth. And it went from there. And when they started all this mandating and lockdowns and the hysteria on television about it, and the fear mongering, and then eventually, we've got a case in our shire, in our region, one case. That's it. We're going into lockdown, and people couldn't be out in the streets because we had one case, and these cases where people were asymptomatic, they had something shoved up their nose, and they were told that they were sick when they didn't even have any symptoms. That's how bad the virus was. I mean, it gobsmacking. But after looking at it and the research that's been done by so many well-versed scientists and doctors and epidemiologists and virologists and vaccinologists and the whole lot of them, gene technology people, and what's happened with all the injuries and all the deaths, and then the government's handling of it has just been atrocious. And then when you look at how it was all run in lockstep together with other countries, and they were doing the exact same policies, and World Health Organization were had control of it, and you could see and you could sense that this was a control mechanism that was being played out, and it was all about enslaving and controlling people. And then, lo and behold, whilst all this is happening, it's okay you couldn't go to your local shop, but you could have your large scale shops open, you could have brothels open, you could get alcohol, all of these things, and yet you couldn't drive to out of a 5K zone and all this sort of hideous stuff. It was absurd, and at that time we actually there was a network of us that were putting information up on social media and trying to alert people to what was going on, because it was quite evident that it was harmful. A lot of people were being hurt, and we didn't want particularly our family members to be vaccinated and put themselves at risk of these untried vaccines. And it's just the most horrendous thing, really, the most outrageous thing.
Fraser, they, in the beginning of the supposed pandemic, it was very difficult for anyone who was searching to find out whether their concerns were real. It was almost impossible. The censorship was unbelievable. So how did you find, did you hear, or did somebody say, well, try this person, or, how did you actually find out about the epidemiologists and the virologists that you listened to, because everything was being censored?
Well, the censorship didn't start immediately. I think they didn't realise how active people were going to be, and I think a lot of people, there was a lot of information being disseminated. They thought they could just sort of brush it off and say it was fake information and so on. But when you have qualified people with their whole lives as career professionals, specialists in their fields, like at the top of the fields, coming out and revealing all this stuff, you can't just brush it off, and it can't be brushed off by some crazy, silly, fake fact checker, somebody who's employed by Meta or something, who's going to argue the point with somebody who's put their whole life into researching human cells and so on. So.
But what the argument with people is that the majority of doctors and the majority of specialists were on the side of, what the government narrative and the health authority narratives. So can you explain to people, why the minority should be believed?
Because the whole thing had been rehearsed. It had been played out in Event 201, which was a complete rehearsal of the whole thing, and that was only undertaken 5 months or something prior to the actual event. And it was a simulation of a virus that leaked out of a lab in Wuhan in China and contaged China, and then broke out and spread throughout the world. And and then the governments responded in a lockstep, synchronized way of handling it. It was all played out and practiced, and so you sort of have to wonder. And then lo and behold, within a few months of that simulation happening, oh my God, it's happened. Our worst nightmares have happened. There's been a breach of a virus out of a lab in Wuhan, where a bat's spread from a bat to humans. Which is absolute bollocks. We now know, and it's on the White House website, that it was a fabricated virus. Say fabricated, it would have been worked on and developed by man as a gain of function contagion, and deliberately manufactured to spread. And they tested it out in 18 beforehand and had prepped it up and released it when they did. But on top of that, the reasoning that the mainstream doctors or the majority of doctors just fell into line was that they were ignorant to it as well, and they were relying upon the advice that was coming from their superior health bodies above them, like the TGA and like AFRA or ATAGI, and they were threatened by ATAGI. They were sent letters, and there are copies of letters quite freely available for people to see, where they were threatened that if they didn't follow the narrative, that they would be, they risked being deregistered, and so they were forced to. They had their arms held up behind their back, but to a degree that is. And so I think a lot of them just thought that it was going to be okay and they were doing the right thing. And then they started to inject people thinking that they were doing the right thing. And then when people started to return to their surgeries with adverse reactions, which was happening at an incredible rate. And I do know a nurse who was a senior nurse at one of the large medical centres down our way. And she joined our group and she told us that there were over 500 adverse reactions, returns to their medical centre, which is only a small rural, it's one of the bigger ones in our area, but it's still only a small rural centre. And there were over 500 in the first 2 or 3 weeks, or 3 to 4 weeks. It was incredible the amount of adverse reactions, and she was trying to get them to all report them to the government, but the system was so onerous and difficult that people couldn't do it, and she was trying to help them through it and do it, and she got told by the seniors of the medical centre that she couldn't do it because it was a burden, taking up too much time. She couldn't do it, and they didn't want to make a big scene of it because there was this agenda that if you balked on it and showed any dissent towards it, you would be creating vaccine hesitancy. And the government was adamant, we can't have vaccine hesitancy. The health department, we have to get it into people's arms. We'll have to tell them whatever it takes, that they need to have these vaccines. And now and since, and with all the harms and the loss of life, like we're not talking about just a handful of lives. We're talking about people having their immune systems damaged big time. People seem to have this thought that if you have a shot and you maybe fall over that afternoon or that night or something like that, and you have a major adverse reaction, that oh yeah, okay, that was the vaccine. But if you've been okay for a couple of days and then you fall over and something happens 3 days later, you go, well, it couldn't have been the vaccine because that was 3 days ago. But the lunacy is that these vaccines are harming people, harming their immune systems, damaging their immune systems, and making them vulnerable to all sorts of other ailments. Damaged immune systems induces all these things to kick in and harm them. All these heart issues, blood clotting, cancers. It's unreal what's been going on, and so many things have come to the fore. Cancer is just off its head everywhere, and you've got ambulances running around at an incredible rate, which like never before in our region. In our region, if you heard an ambulance going, you would stop and pause and think, oh geez, there's been an accident, or wonder what's happened. I wonder who it is. But now it's like a daily event, and not once in the day, but 3 times, 4 times in the day, you'll hear ambulances howling off somewhere. The ambulance folk themselves must have an understanding of this, but there seems to be cognitive dissonance that's really kicked in with a lot of people, and they just don't want to know. And that, as I say, I think it's like that. It's that belief that if you haven't just had a jab within a day or 2 or 3, that it can't have been that. It can't be that. Someone falls over with a heart attack 3 months later. No, couldn't have been the jab. It's just the fact they've had a heart attack. Well, yeah, why? Because they had a blood clot. Because of what these jabs do to your body. And now we've got all this DNA contamination, contaminated DNA, but even just the fact that there's DNA modification put into your body genetic modification, which it was never approved for. It was never approved to genetically to add any DNA or any genetic modifying to no potential to it, but it's over the DNA levels by these vaccines have been found all over the world in studies that they're breaching the acceptable limit of DNA in the vaccines, or contaminated DNA, by up to 400 times. In Australia, they've been found over 400 times, and then there's been testing done on multiple cases throughout Australia where it's remained in their body. It's still in their body after 3 years, 4 years. It's still in their bodies, and it's just damaging people's immune system. But our government have been told about this, and they're doing nothing. They bury their heads in the sand. They go to the TGA and say, well, what's going on? This is a bit alarming. And the TGA go, well, everything, nothing to see here. And people have to realise that the TGA, people think, oh, our TGA uphold the highest standards for Australians. Well, unfortunately, the TGA, just like anyone else, if you're being funded, which they are, to the tune of 96% of their money by big pharmaceutical companies, then you are beholden to those companies. And without that funding, your existence comes to question. So for all this time, they've been receiving this huge money. And during the COVID period, Pfizer and Moderna and I think AstraZeneca actually contributed $50 million to TGA's coffers over that time, or close on 50 million, 49 or something like that, million to their coffers. And so they are defending the status quo. They made a decision to support the FDA's findings back in the day. They didn't even do their own testing on these vaccines. They just supported the FDA's findings from the US, and the FDA's in the US they just ran with the studies that Pfizer and Moderna had produced themselves. So it was the Fox putting forth their own data about how safe and effective these things were. And on top of that, we all know that there's an immunity. The governments have an immunity to have given these vaccine companies an immunity to the any harms that these things have caused, except if they've lied. So there is scope there for these companies to come crashing down, because it's quite evident that they did lie, because they tried to hide a lot of their own study evidence for 75 years. And if it wasn't for freedom of information requests and efforts put out there by some US senators, I believe, I can't remember who exactly it was, but Naomi Wolfe certainly produced a big doctrine and book about all those 75. There were quite thousands of pages of information, and what it did reveal was that they knew full well that there was a lot of harm through the testing that they had done, and they'd ruled a lot of people out when they were hurt. They deliberately didn't. They actually had women who were pregnant women, and they pulled them out of the test because there was some adverse things happening, and they removed them from the tests. They removed their information, and subsequently there's been a lot of issues with fertility and a lot of issues with pregnant women losing their babies, and so it goes on. And now we have had around 20%, and it's fluctuated a bit up and a bit down, all-cause mortality, death rate, pretty well globally, wherever.
Do you mean like a 20% increase in the excess deaths, not a 20% increase in deaths? So it's not 20% of Australians have died, but there's a 22% increase in the death rate.
Increase on the death rate.
Yeah.
And the reality is that people might say, oh, that's because of COVID. Well, when COVID actually happened, all of a sudden the flu just disappeared, And we had always had a death rate of around about 160,000 people from flu and pneumonia every year, but no one ever talked about it. No one ever knew about it because it was of no real substance or consequence. It just happened. But then when COVID came along, suddenly there were no flu deaths or pneumonia deaths. It was all COVID. And those numbers actually dropped. So we actually had a year where we had a lower death rate during that COVID time before they got the vaccines out. And then from the moment they rolled the vaccines out, then this increase in deaths just steamrolled from there. And it's been going on ever since. But now they've actually changed the statistical way that they look at that death rate data. And they used to look back and compare it over like a 10 or 15 year period. But they stopped doing that. They started to only look back from 2022 when they started the vaccine rollout, which is just insane. And blind Freddie or anyone with half a mind can see why they did that. And it's the deception is quite awesome. But you know, we're living in a world and in a time where deception is massive in everything, in business, in government. And it's sad because, you know, we need to be able to trust our governments. We need to be able to trust our medical system. We need to be able to trust authority. We need to be able to trust the law, trust our police, and trust everything that integrity and truth is going to be there. But it's been thrown out with the bathwater, and the government's at the forefront of it. And particularly these regulatory bodies that are regulating all this stuff.
So how have they been able to get away with the Australian population not realising the severity of what's taken place? How have they pulled it off so that most Australians don't realise?
Yeah, well, you know, they have, during the COVID time, they propped up a lot of these media companies and newspapers, and they funded media. They controlled the narrative. They had their, or what was it, emergency cabinet group that made these decisions and so on. And they control the media. So the media were singing the songs on the hymn sheet, and they were not giving both sides of the story, and they were portraying. They used the media as a major tool to scare people to get these vaccines. And,
but isn't the media's role to expose corruption and, you know, so what is going on if they are not exposing this significant level of corruption and the significant level of deaths?
Well, we're at a turning point in our existence because the mainstream media have been compromised to the point where their cognitive dissonance. It's not so much so. It's deliberate. I talked to a journalist the other day and about this, and he admitted that they know about a lot of this stuff, but they can't talk about it, and so they've been hamstrung. So we're really at a time where people who are starting to awaken to the deceptions and all these things are steering away from mainstream media, and it's becoming. You look at the ratings. I don't know whether they still have ratings for television anymore because I don't watch it. But the thing is that you know, we actually call it the legacy media or the dinosaur media. It's dying because people are over it. People actually want truth. Everyone wants truth. And when you've got these fake people giving you fake stories and amplified stories, and it's so evident, right down to everything. They contrive it, they doctor it up, they soup it up, climate change, all this stuff. And somebody hurts himself, oh, well, they didn't just hurt themselves, they near killed themselves, you know. It's alarmism about everything. It's ridiculous. So people are awakening to that, and the fact that the government can just dictate to them, and the globalists, those who actually own the media, the real big players that own the media, they're the ones that control the narrative. They control the government. So the governments are beholden to these globalist entities and their masters.
So who are the globalists?
Well, the globalists are, those who actually own these major big corporations and companies, and like most companies in this world, nearly all of them, their main shareholders are these globalists, and these shareholders, own are like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and a few others, but they control the whole ball game. They are really at the helm. And BlackRock and Vanguard, if you look at who owns BlackRock and who owns Vanguard, well, they both own each other. So, so you've got one owner of both of them, and they own State Street pretty well as well. So there's a handful of families really at the top end that dictate. I don't know how many. I haven't met any of them, and but I don't know how many. But that's how it sort of works, and they control. Over time, they've just acquired everything. And BlackRock are in this process of all our governments become beholden with this sort of NGOs, non-governmental organisations that come in and dictate policy to governments. World Economic Forum, all of these bodies, Bilderberg groups, trilateral commissions, and so it goes on.
It sounds like a very sophisticated, coordinated group. What is this about? Money, control? What's the end game?
Well, it certainly has traditionally been about money, but it's more about power and control, because they are so frightened that they're going to lose control because of such things as communication, social media, and people's ability to transfer information and learn and become aware of stuff, consciousness rising. So they're really keen to diminish the public consciousness, and they're doing everything in their powers, and they have been for quite a while, fluoridating the water and things like that, and toxifying our foods, and generally not about health. It's actually about masking health and getting people onto a gravy train of just siphoning the money out of the people to keep them on the health treadmill when they're not well, and they keep them crook, and they just have to keep pouring their money into trying to keep alive, and feeding them toxic foods and all of this sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's about control, and they want to establish a system where they have global control that they can never lose. And so they're actually trying to amalgamate man with machine. The fourth industrial revolution, as Klaus Schwab calls it, and it's an assimilation of man, of biological man and computer, so they can actually dictate your thinking, microchip you into your mind, access your mind, and create a race of subordinate people that are unable to have freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and absolute.
Why do you think it's so hard for the general population? Because social media is swimming with, video reels exposing what you're talking about, and yet so many people are not. They don't get it. What do you think is, why do you think it's so hard for people to understand that there is this level of control and manipulation? What's stopping them from seeing it?
Well, I think that a lot of people are just set in cement in their little ways where they follow the footy and they turn their telly on at a set time and have their regimented little enslaved lifestyles, which have given them a bit of comfort and a bit of peace, and they don't want to delve a little bit deeper behind things and really try and nut out what's going on. But they're not encouraged. They've been dumbed down. Our education system, it dumbs people down, and it's becoming more so. You'd only have to look at the standard of education. We've dropped significantly in Australia from what we used to be to a much lower. IQs are dropping, and it's so they'd rather sort of people who are quite subordinate and non-critical thinking people. They want a bunch of people that they can manipulate and enslave, and they've been saying that for well over 100 years. The Rockefellers, that was one of their things, that they, we don't want a bunch of thinking people. We want a bunch of people that we can enslave, and we will feed them what we want and when we want, and they will do what we say, and that's it. And they've still been on that mantra, and they are behind this climate change narrative, which is front and centre of what's happening today, and people are hysterical about it, and they've made this hysterical environment. And people say, well, but the weather's changing, and we're having all these radical storms, and it's all happening. You can actually look back in time, and most of these events, nearly all of them, have happened way prior, way worse, and they're not unprecedented. But with the media hype and all the rest of it, it's just putting the fear of everything into people. And the agenda is being driven by the United Nations, and it's part of that global agenda to bring in this one world government system. So that to do that, they need to have a problem reaction solution. So the problem is climate change. Then you've got to have the reaction is the fear in the people, and then the solution. We're going to fix it. We've got to go carbon neutral, and everyone's going to have to comply with everything that we say. We're going to have you've got to stay close at home. You can't drive this, you can't do that, you can't eat this, you can't eat that. You have to do exactly as we say, and you're only curfew people, the whole kit and caboodle. There's 15-minute cities that they're pushing for, and they're enslaving people, making life so hard for people. The cost of living is deliberately getting blown out to a point where they're going to go, well, I can't work, I haven't got any work, my business is closed, and then they'll put you onto the drip feed of the government social system, and it'll be a social credit system, like in China, where you have to comply with absolutely everything. They'll say, okay, it's time for your next mRNA booster shot, full of nanotechnology that connects you up to the to the Starlink, connects you up to the cyber world. During COVID, they were running out 5G towers all over the place. They were running out all these digital lights, or whatever they are, with their 5G capacity everywhere, in every town. And it's like, really? How can this be? You get up in the morning, and they've been working out in the street, putting these things up, changing to all of these LED lights and all this sort of stuff. And it's not about reduction in power and anything like that. It's because those things can be used as little transmitters and receivers for your smart meters that they're going to fit in your house, and everything in your house will be surveilled, and you'll be surveilled. They'll even have cameras in your house. They'll get to the point where you cannot get away from being seen, and you'll need to identify yourself with your facial recognition or your microchip or whatever it is. And look, they've been saying it in the book of Revelations forever, and it seems to be absolutely coming true. So, it's quite, it's very, very disturbing, and people are sleeping through it, but they're hooked into their television and their cognitive dissonance. They don't want to be have something nasty that's upsetting to them revealed. They want to hope that they're okay, and that the safety is still there, this safety net of their little existence. And okay, it's costing more, we'll just pay it. Now we've got to drive our cars even slower, and I've got to pay the fine, and you're treated like a criminal because you're doing 55 kilometres down on a 50 zone. I mean, it's just insane. It's all control. It's bringing in the control grid.
And the problem is that the majority of people don't understand what's happening, and like you say, a lot of them, they don't necessarily they think this conspiracy is so large that it could not be true, and they don't want to distrust the government, they don't want to distrust the health authorities, and their source of information, trusted source of information, is the media, and it's very hard. So what do people like you, if you've got all these barriers to the truth, how do you get them to wake up? Because without the majority of people understanding what's happening, and that it's happening now, there's deadlines to these implementing the one world. How do you have to have them on board? How can you get to them?
Look, it's as you were saying, all the social media and that has been, they've come down very heavily and censoring the ability for people who have free speech. They're bringing legislations in, mis and disinformation bills. They determine what they consider to be disinformation or misinformation. All of this bollocks. I mean, for a real society, you should be able to express yourself with whatever view, and the truth will come to the surface anyway. But to actually say you can't think that, or you can't say that, or you can't express that, it's just, what are we living in, a communist society? That's exactly what's happening. And
is the one world agenda? Is the one world agenda a communist agenda?
Well, it's actually probably, I think it's more called a technocracy, I think, really. But we're going to be controlled by statistics and algorithms and artificial intelligence, and arguing with AI and transhumanism, and and if you don't comply, they'll deal with you, and so it is very communistic, but it's actually technocracy, which has been around for quite a while, but they've never been able to achieve it because they haven't had the technology to control and regulate people with data and information. But data is the new gold. They've been accumulating everyone's data, everything. Oh, we need your phone number, we need your email, we need your bank details, we need to know everything. We need to have your locations on, and we need this and we need that, and we need to know where you are, we need to surveil you. It's, every bit of information about every person is there for these authorities to follow. If they don't like you, or they want to find out a bit about you, they can find out absolutely everything about you. They can hack your phone. The governments are giving them these rights in lockstep with every other government. Right now, they have the right to hack your phone at any moment. They have the right to seize your bank accounts. They have the right to take money out of your accounts. They've shut down whistleblowers, people who speak the truth. They're the ones that go to jail, not the criminals that have breached the law. It's the ones who reveal it. So what sort of society are we living in now? They've been reducing these rights for 15 years. I think it all started around 9/11, really. This fear of terrorism and all this, that was a manufactured, fabricated scenario, event, to start to bring in this, was part of bringing in this thing. I mean, the one world, new world order, or the one world government, is not new. It's been on the table for over 100 years, or 120, 130 years, and they've been working away at it. The Marxist communists have been hard at it, but the Rockefellers and all, and the Rothschilds and those mogul families are behind all of this, and they've they don't want to lose their power, so they're doing whatever they can. And once they got people into this enslaved technocratic grid where you have to comply with everything, then that's it. The freedom for humanity is gone, absolutely gone, a thing of the past, and everyone will be beholden and totally enslaved to the system, and you'll be treated like chattel, because as technology moves on, they'll see you as they call you, useless eaters, and unless you're of value to them, then they will dispose of you. And it's a eugenics thing. They carry on about population being out of control and the world's going to capitulate because we've got too many people on it. And they come up with these spurious figures of 8 billion people, but they're very arguable figures. But the real reality is that the population is in decline globally, and they've achieved their objective, sterilising everyone. And now most countries are below the sustainable birth rate levels. People can't, are not getting pregnant. It's not happening for various reasons, but toxic foods and vaccines and a concerted effort on behalf of these globalists to make this happen. They've had an agenda to do it, and Bill Gates himself, has always stated that if we do a really good job with vaccines, we should be able to reduce the population by 10 or 15%. Yeah.
People were saying, at the time when that was doing the rounds on social media, that's not really what he meant. But people, people don't say stuff, especially him in a TED talk, say stuff he didn't mean. With what's coming, this one world agenda, and they say the deadline for this is 2030. Do you think it's possible that they could, create the 15-minute cities, get rid of the cash, create the digital IDs, which will really put us in a digital prison by 2030? Is it possible?
Well, they're certainly pushing hard. When you consider what's happened in the last 5 years, since 2020, and where we're at now, it's quite possible. I'm not saying they're going to have their smart cities completed by that time, but they'll certainly have their social credit system in, and they'll have their digital ID. I think they're introducing the digital ID this year. So once they've got the digital ID in place, then it opens the door for them with their central banking digital currency, and then they will make cash obsolete. They'll phase it out. They're already sort of giving people opportunities to stop using cash. Certain places where they won't use cash, and some people tend to think it's all really convenient, but they don't see beyond their little sphere, their little world, and they don't see the bigger picture. But if they knew this stuff and didn't just consider it to be a conspiracy theory, the old conspiracy theory, like it was a conspiracy that JFK was assassinated by someone other than, whatever his name was, I forget his name, but as has been revealed, and as everyone knows, anyone with half a mind doesn't have to look very far to find out that the CIA were heavily involved, and the government themselves were involved, and who runs them, who pushes them? Well, that comes from Mossad, the Israeli Zionist drivers behind this stuff. So they run the American government basically, and have massive infiltration all over the world, and they really dictate a lot of this stuff. And they are all those globalists do tend to be Zionists.
So we've got about 7 minutes left, because we've up to about 53 minutes now. Goes quick, doesn't it, when you're having fun? Yeah. Can you talk to about what you think? I mean, what we've been led to believe is that human beings are just slabs of meat that live and die, and that there's nothing significant about us. What do you think? What are we? Who are human beings? What is the purpose of us? And what have we got the capacity to have different levels of consciousness? And if we do, what does it mean?
Oh, well, certainly I believe that we do have, and we certainly do have, because you just talk to people and you meet people and you know people, and some people have got certain higher levels of consciousness than others, and you can see it in people, and you go, well, have they learnt that, or is that something that they were born with, or is it intuitive? And a lot of people are very aware of their conscious growth and consciousness growth and expansion and their spiritual side of things. And obviously they've been trying to suppress our consciousness. They've been trying to suppress our pineal gland, and our pineal gland, there's a connection to a higher level of source, and that's something that they've been trying to suppress. They don't want us to be expanding our consciousness because we'll arise above their fear narratives and all that sort of stuff. So to control the people, they want you to live in a state of fear and not have a high level of consciousness. So they're suppressing our consciousness levels, and so I believe that we are here to learn lessons and grow, and then move on. I don't know whether we come back to have to repeat them if we haven't learned the lesson, or I'm not quite sure, but we'll all find out one day, I suppose.
So your role in, running for Eden Monero with the Heart Party, is that because of your concerns about what's happening in the world, and it's your way of doing something that's going to hopefully wake more people up?
Yeah, absolutely, because the time is of the essence. These deadlines that they're setting for these locked-in changes in our society, which are going to put us into this control grid, are on our doorstep right now. And if we don't deal with them, then we're going to be confronted with having to live in that condition where we won't be able to break free of it because we've locked into it. And it'll mean costing your life and other people's lives to try and break free of it, and you'll have to sacrifice your life. We need the consciousness to shift, and people have become aware, and there are a lot of people becoming aware. So it is good. On our ticket, we've got 4 of us that are sort of quite aware of a lot of this and are calling it out. Out of 8 people on our ticket, there's half of them are calling this stuff out to the public at these forums and meetings and things like that, and trying to share stuff on social media about it. But as we discussed, we don't get the independents and small parties, or particularly those who might have these alternate or take views rather than the mainstream, are quashed, and we don't get the airtime on any mainstream media. And on social media, they're being hamstrung as well. So there's censorship going big time. I can't share stuff. I'm really hamstrung. I do have a good network of people that know me and are of the same mind. And there's an army out there that are helpful, and that's wonderful. And they're doing what they can. And but when you're competing with this monolithic sort of 2 parties, 2 wings of the same bird who are funded by the government, big party, big corporate funding that pushes their agenda. 2 wings of the same bird. They're arguing over peripheral little things, and these candidate meetings we've been going to, and they're just they're doing a lot of window dressing. Oh, we'll give you this and we'll give you that, and we'll fix your park, and we'll fix a bit of road here and a bit of that there, and in your region. It's so peripheral to the big picture issues of this country, the $1 trillion debt that we have, that we've been borrowing and borrowing, living off borrowed money, that our kids are going to have to confront and deal with. I mean, it's just disgusting. And yet you can't get a comment out of these 2 birds of the 2 wings of the same bird, or 2 birds of the same wing, whatever they are. They can't even comment about that, how they're going to address that or deal with that. It's disgraceful. That's just all window dressing. But those people, unfortunately, their consciousness is not there, but they're the ones that they like because they're easily manipulated. They do what they're told, and that's it. They don't question things and push for change. So anyone who does that is always up against it. But if we're going to have a new world, then we've got to have people who are going to push back and stand up for these things. And we need to get our sovereignty back. We need to get our country back in order, and get rid of this climate change narrative, and address the real issues. And that's the people who are struggling financially, low income people, and housing affordability, all the fundamentals, and particularly health, getting us off the gravy train of these globalist chemically modified and contaminated foods and health system that's just one drug on top of another drug, all chemically produced drugs. It's just insane what's going on. If we get back to the basics of natural, good, healthy foods, biodynamic, organic, natural produce, everything is within those foods. Proper, decent meat, not this synthetic lab grown 3D printed stuff which is going to poison people, eating bugs and grubs and all sorts of ridiculous things in the name of trying to save the planet because of some carbon mythology. This carbon myth of 400 parts per million is carbon in the atmosphere, and it has increased from 300 to 400 over the 100-year period, or 50 or 60 years. And in that time, of that 400 parts per million, man is responsible for 3% of that. And of that 3%, Australia is responsible for 1% of that. That 3%. So 1% of 3% is the tiniest little morsel of nothing. It's not even a pinhead on a table like this one here in front of us. So to think that we are responsible, or even that 3%, which is the man-made part, is responsible for changing the weather to a point where we're going to destruct the whole planet, is absolute insanity. But this agenda was brought into play by the Rockefellers and Morris Strong, who was an oil mogul, and Al Gore, another oil mogul. All of these big high rollers are billionaires driving this agenda, and it's about control, reaction, problem, reaction, solution. There it is, in a nutshell. And
okay, you've got 3 minutes to give us. Is there hope?
There is hope, because there's a lot of people who are shifting, and if we do get a gig in the government, and we can get the balance of power, we can manipulate outcomes by the government that we allow to take government on the agreement that we will support them to govern under the guise that they will support things that we are about, which will be revealing the truth about a whole lot of this stuff, holding true accountability, helping and dealing with the people that have been hurt with vaccines, and turning it and making people aware of the health issues with all this chemicalized foods and all of this stuff. A bit like what's happening with Robert F. Kennedy in the US, where he's leaking out all this information and revealing the real truths about the vaccines and what's been happening. 52 doses to children, and we have a chronic illness rate of 60% in Australia, and the highest rate of cancer in the world here in Australia. It's unbelievable what's going on. We're going backwards so quickly. If we don't fix it, it's all over. But so that's basically where we're at. So we need the support of the people to help give us a gig and get the foot in the door. There's quite a few independents who are well aware and well awake. Michael O'Neill is an outstanding leader of our party, and he would be fantastic to have in the Senate. He's Barbara O'Neill's husband, and Barbara is in the top 10 influencers in the world with natural health. So she is so highly acclaimed that she is in demand all over the world. People are waking up to this, and thanks to Barbara and thanks to Michael and people like Gerard Rennick, who have been calling it out big time in politics, and yet Gerard can't get any airtime on mainstream. They call him a cooker, but his knowledge and his financial knowledge is outstanding. We can turn this problem around, but we need to get a gig. We need to get independents in there, small parties, people who are on our page, and we can make the difference. So, vote One Heart Party, vote for Fraser Buchanan in the seat of Eden Monaro, vote for Michael O'Neill and all the other heart candidates throughout Australia, and Gerard Rennick as well, and his People First parties, the Libertarians, and there's a lot of them out there, but and One Nation guys, and the Trumpets of Patriots. They're all doing a good job. don't vote for the red and blue teams. Two wings of the same bird. You know what you're going to get. Look what they've given us. They're arguing over a bit of window dressing. Throw them out, kick them out, get rid of them, or they're going to destroy your kids' futures. And that's what they're doing, and that's what they've done, and it'll be the same old, same old. Don't say, don't complain about it when it happens. It is so tough for your kids now. 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy if they stay there. That's what the agenda is. So, about time you woke up, I'd say.
Thank you, Fraser, for your time.
Cheers. Thank you.